But in a situation where you find that a person look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
Because I have said that.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's Daybreak on Trust Television, and it is that segment where we bring you the stories that are making the front pages of major newspapers in Nigeria today. We will begin as usual with the Daily Trust, and on the front page of the Daily Trust is the big one. The major disruption that hit the landscape. Everybody seemed to have been shaken by it, from a POS operator to a crayfish seller in the market. Now the senators, the distinguished senators of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And so the headline here reads, with a kicker, cash withdrawal limit, businesses will collapse. This is according to senators. We can't go cashless in a hurry, according to the Senate President Lawal. It will kill our business, POS operators, and CNPP backs policy. We have there, you'll find the details of this on page 4. We also have there a major photograph on the front page around efforts on peace, there with the Esunupe and the chairman of the Niger State Council of Traditional Leaders, Yaya Abubakar, Archbishop Emeritus of Abuja, John Cardinal Onaikon, President of the Christian Association of Nigeria, Most Reverend Daniel C. Oko, and the Sultan of Sokoto, and President, Nigeria Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, Alhaji Saad Abubakar III, and others during the National Summit on Disability Inclusion for Religious and Traditional Rulers in Nigeria, organized by the National Commission for Persons with Disability in Abuja yesterday. And we have the other belt right under that picture. Nigeria must end insecurity for smooth electoral process. This is coming from the British government, and you'll find that on page 12. And two other stories there. CBN names acting managing director for NISRA. You will recall the Daily Trust story that led to the ouster of the immediate past MD. And we also have there another popular story making the wave since yesterday. ICPC grills the bunch, 10 orders over N-Power funds. These are some of the stories that made the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper.
All right, so we'll be moving on to The Punch. The Punch still has a kicker about the cash withdrawal limits. It says that a Senate grills CBN chiefs tomorrow, and POS operators get a waiver to pay processing fee. The riders attached to the story. One says central bank deputy governors to face National Assembly panel, and Senate debates policy next week. The other rider says CBN says no going back on new cashless policy, allays fears of rural dwellers and others. That story is on page 2 of the Punch newspaper this morning, and just below it we have a pictorial of people and cars. And a story down there says EFCC auctions forfeited cars wants compliance with guidelines. Okay, that story is on page 8. There, get more details in the Punch newspaper this morning. And talking about the polls, INEC knocks a Tinubu over comment on e-transmission. Again, more details on page 2 this morning. And then police launch manhunt for woman who burned a parent. Okay, that's a very pathetic one. Page 5 has that story. And then Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, gridlock worsens amid road work suspense. Okay, and you can get details of that in the Punch newspaper this morning, precisely on page 4 and 5. And let's take a look at the top. We have contesting a presidency again will diminish me. That's coming from the former president of Nigeria, Goodluck Jonathan. It's on page 12. And then Empower fraud. ICPC detains the band and lawyer cries foul. Number 4, page 4 rather, has that story. And then Buhari failed Leah Sharibu. That's coming from an activist. To get more details of that story is on page 3. The last story this morning we'll be taking from the Punch newspaper says oil marketers fooled NNPCL 34 days sufficiency claim. All right, page 21 of the Punch newspaper accommodates that story. That's pretty much what you can see on the front page of the Punch newspaper this morning.
Clearly, the sufficiency claim by the NNPCL is always on paper, isn't it?
It's always there, and Nigerians are watching.
You know, for several days counting now, it is hellish, you know, to attempt to even get on the queues and the filling stations who want to get fuel at the control price. We now move on to the Nation newspaper this morning. Of course, it is also leading with the issues around cash withdrawal limits set by the central bank and efforts by the senators to grill the central bank governors and other members of his team. But we take other stories that are quite different. Here at the top left-hand corner, you'll find 2023 court validates Tinubu's candidacy. We seem to have this validation and counter-validation coming up every other time. And then moving on, petrol scarcity to end soon, says the agency. Ipman gives 7 days ultimatum. I hope this ends soon, especially as we move neck deep into the Yuletide. 1.9 trillion. Senate threatens MDA with zero allocation. And to other headlines there, the bench orders under probe for NPower cash. And we have other stories there on the front page. Federal government to governors account for ecological fund. You would find the fact sheets there of distribution between June 2015 and May 2022. These states have taken in several billions of naira, only for us to then be faced with serious ecological challenge, and they keep telling you there are no funds anywhere. And to other stories on the front pages, protest in Lagos as police officer kills man. And Lagos cut tuition by 65% in varsity. This is a welcome development, but for it to have impact, others will tell you that the same thing should be done in the lower schools, because not everybody gets to the varsity level. And these are the major stories on the front page of the Nation newspaper this morning.
Okay, let's get to this day newspaper, where the lead story is on NNPC, and it's talking about how the NNPC raised crude oil production from 900,000 million barrels per day to 1.6 million barrels per day. There are more than 4 riders attached to this story. One says clarifies 70% illegal refineries deactivated. And another says reveals Nigeria was losing 21 million barrels monthly, $1.9 billion before recovery. Another one says Nigeria will be shocked to know those behind oil theft when exposed. And moving on, he says declares suspect oil thefts undergoing prosecution. The last rider says blames a current fuel scarcity on distribution hiccups. All right, those are the riders attached to the lead story in These Day newspaper this morning. It started on the front page, but you continue reading on page 10 this morning. And let's take a look at other headlines. At the top, we have fallout of Naira redesign. Analysts back CBN's cash withdrawal policy. Riders attached to the story say move will boost monetary policy effectiveness, tax compliance, and may strengthen Naira. Another says urge Apex Bank to reduce bank charges. And the last rider says CBN Deputy Governor nominees to explain new policy to senators during screening on Friday. That story started on the front page at the top, but you continue reading on page 10 this morning. Then we have a pictorial about this day group hosting librarian leaders. You can get more details. And yes, that's the stories on the front page of... Okay, before we go on the last one, it says UK, we have no preferred presidential candidate in Nigeria, and AOC chieftain donates 70 cars to support Tinubu and Shettima campaign. That story too started on the front page, but page 10 has more details of that story and the news in the These Day newspaper this morning.
Interesting developments there from this day. We move on to the Guardian newspaper, one of the flagships in Nigeria. And of course, it does appear that everywhere must have been shaken by this similar decision. Here it is saying CBN cash withdrawal limits. You would think all the newsroom sort of had an agreement to run with this.
That's one of the
Agents in uproar as Senate debates new policy Tuesday. That will be next week. They want us out of business, mobile money agents lament. Policy good, but implementation will be difficult. That's according to BACAN. BACAN is the Bank Customers Association of Nigeria. And Huriwa, cash withdrawal limits can't help Naira depreciation, will lead to job losses. We see how this pans out with the picture there of the president, the central bank governor, and the Senate president, Ahmed Lawal. You'll find a picture of a POS there. It does appear that attention completely has shifted to the POS as a business rather than how it impacts us as a people. My initial impression is that POS businesses could be regarded as corporate rather than individuals. We have other stories there on the front page. Facebook prepares for Nigeria's election, tighten nose on misinformation. It will be interesting to see how this is implemented. U.S. explain exclusion of 5 African leaders from summit. And global partners may end broad COVID-19 vaccination efforts in Nigeria. Others. You find that on page 4. Kaduna records over 300 cases of GBV under El-Rufai, says Commissioner. This should be gender-based violence, isn't it?
Gender-based violence.
Oh, okay. Interesting. And to another bet right there on the front page, UK warns against intimidation of voters, rules out preferred presidential candidates. You'll find this on page 8. These are the major stories on the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning.
Let's take a look at the major stories on the Nigerian Tribune. The lead story is still leading with the CBN's cash withdrawal limit. Senate expresses worry set to debate policy. Riders attached the stories are threatens to withhold 2023 capital budget of 100 MDAs. And the other rider says policy will have tax implication for individuals and MSMEs. That's coming from tax expert there. It's page 4 and 6 of the Nigerian Tribune has details of the lead story this morning. Let's take a look at the top. We have Muslim ticket to set new tone in Nigeria's political landscape come 2023. That's coming from the wife of the APC presidential candidate, Tinubu's wife. All right, and then unlike APC, PDP will not fail Osun. That's coming from Atiku. Unlike APC or PDP will not fail Osun. Atiku there, and the pledges constitutional role for traditional rulers. And another writer says Labour governor candidate joins a PDP. Okay, interesting development there. Page 2 has more details of that story. Then ICPC arrests the bank over alleged diversion of N-Power funds. Page 20 has that story in the Nigerian Tribune. And then 25 held in Germany over suspected coup plot. Page 11 has details of the story. And then IGP launches stolen vehicles report portal. IGP launches stolen vehicles report portal. Page 29 has stories. And then we have a pictorial of a lot of people standing by cars. And it says EFCC auctions 435 forfeited cars in Lagos. Page 20 has details of that story. Then at the bottom strip, we have protest as police inspector shoots boy to death in Lagos. Quite a sad story. Page 28 has more details. And then reps tackle ministry over submission of budget proposal for non-existing colleges of education. Page 4 has that details. And then account for ecological funds you collected, federal government tells governors. Page 8 of the Nigerian Tribune has the story. That's the stories we'll be taking on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune this morning.
And to the last paper we're reviewing this morning, the Blueprint newspaper sort of leads with a different headline this morning, which reads, Tinubu crosses fourth legal hurdle towards 2023. Court dismisses suit, declares Iheoma Milusum in interloper. Interesting. Muslim ticket setting tone for new political landscape. Tinubu's wife, and UK has no interest in Buhari's successor officials. And you find these details on pages 5 and 6 of the Blueprint newspaper. Two other headlines there. FG recovers 120 billion proceeds of crime. Environment Ministry generates 8.6 billion in 7 years. Kaduna Abuja train kidnap victims demand compensation, and you'll find that on page 14. And alleged murder, court orders police to arrest produce retired AIG Mbu. You'll find that on page 7. And two other stories on the front page. The Banj arrest move towards transparency in and power, says the humanitarian minister. And Olanik Pekun swears in new lawyers, warns against campaign of calumny. Masop condemned planned IPOP seat at home order. And 28 years after, FG redeemed housing pledge to Westerhoff. That's Nigeria for you, if you like. Police inspector kills Dubai returnee in Lagos. And the final one here today is the second Niger bridge to be commissioned December 15th. That's the much we would take on the newspaper reviews this morning. This is to allow us drill down on some of the issues that made the front pages. And to do that with us this morning is a regular in the house, the editor-in-chief of Deadline newspaper, Marlon Nasrirawa. It's a pleasure to have you join us in the studio this morning.
Good morning.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
I saw you shaking your head intermittently whenever we take the issue on the cash withdrawal limit. Since the announcement, which seemed to have hit us like a tornado, we have seen reactions from everywhere. And as I was saying to her earlier, even people who don't spend 5,000 in a day are worried about the 20,000 naira limit. But didn't we see this decision coming, where the CBN always going to allow people just bring back the old notes from their private votes and simply get us to sort of dry clean it into the new notes for them, and they take it back to their vote? What do you see with this decision and some of the issues that have been raised by those that feel it will impact them negatively?
Well, actually, when the CBN was announcing the redesign of the currency, some of the things that they alluded to is this, to say that they are spending so much money in even printing the currency when the country has like a cashless policy. And this is not the first time they are coming up with the attempt, at going cashless. And somehow they didn't succeed because, if you remember, they did it in bits and pieces. They will say Lagos, Port Harcourt, Kano in the first batch, and what have you. And what were people doing? Some will leave Abuja to go to as close as Nasarawa, maybe Maraba, just outside the FCT, and then be able to withdraw all the money that they want, because ours is like more physical. People want to see the money. I remember even the richest man in Africa, there was a time he said, there was a time he went to the bank,
$10 million.
Cashed $10 million just to make sure that, yes, he has that money. So if people like Dangote will do that, you can now understand all the hysteria and what have you. What I really don't understand is what the Senate is already saying, because in one breath they are saying they will need more information from the CBN, and then on the other they are also rejecting it. So which one are they saying? So what I would expect is Nigerians to be able to support this, because I also believe, we have so much cash in circulation in Nigeria, and whether we like it or not, that's like a recipe for corruption and what have you, because when there is money, in the hands of people, it makes it easier, for money to exchange hands and what have you. But if you do that using the mobile platforms, then it can be easier.
Before Maridia comes in, editor, you are widely traveled, and sometimes when these things happen in Nigeria, we create the impression that it's just a Nigerian thing. But when you go to other parts, the most common bill you see in circulation is the 20, whether it's the 20 pounds or the $20 or $10, in fact, as the case. Hardly would you see people bringing out such huge amount of cash to make any kind of purchases. And why is our case different? We try to create the illusion that it's a cash-based economy, but people started this way and moved the other way. It's been 10 years or so since we started implementing. So is it right for the Senate to say we are trying to go cashless in a hurry?
I don't think it's in a hurry because even in advanced societies like the UK you mentioned, even before the technology became this ubiquitous all over the place, they were doing it with the checks. You know, if you need like
huge box,
you use the check. You don't have to carry money all around the place because for all you know, probably that's what aided armed robbery and what have you, because the robbers were sure anytime they stop you on the road, they will have money, they will find money on you. So when things like that ended, maybe that was how we ended up having issues like kidnapping and what have you, because people were no longer traveling with physical cash. So the Senate shouldn't have actually said that, the Senate president, because he was the one who actually mentioned that. All the arguments we may want to make that maybe technology is still a long way in Nigeria, honestly I don't see it in the same light. Like I said, with your check you can be able to do all the major transactions that you will need. But in another breath, like you said, you find people that hardly have a balance of 5,000 naira in their accounts also coming out to shout. And if you are talking about the ones that may go out of business, it's certainly not a good thing. But that's how life works. When the issue of the Abuja-Kaduna train started, if you remember, so many people were saying all those that are into commercial transport will now go out of business. What did they do? They also modernized. They now find a way of taking you to the train station, and then out of it. So you adjust. Like all the mobile money agents we are talking about, it's still a new phenomenon in Nigeria, just like 2 years back. So I would expect the Senate to listen to the people that are coming up with this, in this case the CBN, since it's in their purview to be able to do that, to listen to them, so that whatever they don't understand, they can be made clear and things like that.
All right, and let's move on to another story, of course, which has been sparking a lot of reactions from yesterday till now. Now, we saw that ICPC has arrested a popular pop star in Nigeria, and it's debanged. When you read the story, you go to the backstory, you start wondering what must have happened. How did he get his hands on some of these funds, which was originally supposed to be disbursed by the humanitarian ministry. Now the humanitarian ministry is saying that we allotted ICPC to look into this case. And, at the back of your head, you're wondering how this all happened. What's your reaction to this, judging from the fact that humanitarian ministry allotted the ICPC, and then we have indictment of a popular pop star who is making his own money in the entertainment industry, and then we have the Empower, which is, of course, for teachers.
Well, Nigeria, we see government money as free money. Whoever has access to it, thinks, okay, his own chance has come. I want to believe what the ICPC said, that they are at the level of investigation. And, even the bench, through his lawyers, they are saying, don't make this a media trial, do your investigation, because if you know the track record of the bench, he was always like a hard worker and wouldn't settle for things like this. But it is only the investigation by the ICPC that will actually unravel all the issues. But like I said, so many people consider government money as a given, that if you take it, you may not have to pay it back. And sometimes you wonder why like a ministry that has its own officials will now be settling for third parties to be able to handle things that are supposed to be run by the same government. So I think this is something that we should find a way of ending, and the sooner we do that, the better for all of us.
Interesting. Different kinds of intervention by the humanitarian ministry had come under a series of attack because of the opaque nature and the seemingly invisible beneficiaries, as the case may be. So it's not surprising that we are beginning to see things like this unravel. Like you said, I hope we get to the end of it. One other story that I'd like to get your take on is the one reported by the Nation newspaper, where federal government urged governors to account for ecological funds. And we're seeing disbursement as big as 11.4 billion, 8.9 billion, 15 billion for some states, or several states if you like, 17 for some, 20 in fact for others. And I mean, we're just coming out of a very severe natural disaster, if you like, the floods that sort of ravaged over 30 states. And all the states were everywhere, shouting about not having the funds to even provide palliatives for their citizens that were displaced by this flood. They had no funds to do simple public enlightenment. It wasn't like the enlightenments were not there, but the Ecological Center gave indications of the days and the hour which this flood water, depending on the volume and the size, will hit some of these states. And they just waited for these things to happen. The rural people had no access to those kind of data. They couldn't even mobilize to move them away from that place. With this kind of fund, I mean, does it just stop at asking them to account? Account in what way? Is it just to come out and say, yes, we received it? Or there could be something we could do better to hold governors responsible for how they spend these special funds?
Well, you know, governors are getting away with so many things because of the immunity that they enjoy. And without, you know, any mean for maybe disrespecting them. I remember my friend saying the only area where they do peer review, you know, among governors is the area of corruption, you know, because you find almost all the governors being part of all this. And, you know, ours is a praying country. Before you know it, they will say maybe they will set aside some few money to give it to all our religious leaders before you know it, to pray for it, that things like that wouldn't happen. But we all have anti-corruption agencies. What are they doing? They should be able to trace this money and see where they ended, because if you look at the cashless policy that they are not talking about, which some of our leaders are actually against. What do they do with all the ecological funds that they get? Sometimes they convert them into, you know, foreign currency and stash them somewhere so that they will be using it from time to time, bribing this, you know, taking away all the oppositions before you know it. And then sometimes they convert them to physical cash and keep within the government house. And anytime they have one or two things to do, before you know it, they call all these boys that have no jobs, you know, protesting on behalf of government, and then they settle them. So honestly, we should find a way of going beyond just accusation. Accusation, you know, everybody can make accusations. What we have anti-corruption agencies, like I said, and they should be able to follow up on this money and see what actually happened to them. Because if we are talking about immunity for governors at the moment, they will not remain governors forever. You know, so once they hand over, they should face the music.
But how many of them face the music when they hand over? And how many people return some of this money they've been accused of embezzling?
Well, you know, like I said, that's what some people are saying, because it's quite unfortunate that even if you look at the number of people that are in prison in Nigeria, a population of 200 million, you know, having less than 80,000 prison inmates. Even the ones that we have in prison, most of them are actually on awaiting trial. That shows you there are so many things we are not getting right. You know, if you have money, you can always stall cases, you can always, you know, find your way around and, you know, buy your way out, because that's the allegations that people are making. And without the relevant authorities coming out to show us that that's not the case, I think it's a valid allegations that people can continue to make. So I don't know how we may be able to end this, within the shortest possible time, but we still have to find a way of doing away with it.
Before we let you go, there's this interesting story on the front page of Daily Trust that talks about Governor Babagana Zulum hinting the National Assembly that night travels would commence in January, I think, of next year in Maiduguri. What does that assurance indicate for the security situation in Maiduguri?
Well, that's like a way of showing, security has greatly improved, and that people should now, be free to go about their normal business without any let or hindrance. But then, if you remember the campaign that the road safety is always, embarking on, that don't embark on night travels because of, I also believe, if there is a way you can avoid it, traveling at night may not be the best because if anything should happen, you may not have access to even mechanics, even rescue before you know it. So in one aspect, it's good that he's saying this to show that there is improvement in the area of security and what have you. And then on the other hand, we should actually try to discourage people from embarking on all these.
Don't you think this is coming rather swiftly? Because just last week, we heard of IDPs being closed down, people asked to go back to their ancestral homes, and that things are beginning to return to normal. And then we have the night travels still coming up, to be reintroduced next year. Don't you think that, these decisions are coming swiftly at this time?
Well, sometimes you just have to push on with all the policies you have because you actually do not have the time. To do all the things that you may want to do. And even at that, there are so many things that he will have to maybe just do his own bit so that whoever comes after him, can continue. But here we are, since he's the one, doing all that. And if you remember, even those that are now being resettled, there are so many things going on. Some will say they just took them there and abandoned them, to their own devices, no security and what have you. But since he's the governor, the one in charge of things in the state, coming out to say this, I think it's going to inspire some confidence in people to say that we are gradually getting back to normal.
Perhaps security situation in that area would improve because we've seen some kind of policies being introduced, and then you see some of the soldier barracks very close, or resettlements of the soldiers are taken out, and then we hear something bad has happened. I hope that is not the case for Borno State.
Sorry, I don't even know how the cashless policy will affect people like the Borno State governor. He is in the habit of taking raw cash, to all these displaced persons. So now that they are coming up with all this, unless if he's ready to pay the charges and what have you.
He probably will wait every week. For maybe he use a corporate organization, 500,000 every week, and then wait till another week. Who knows? That's
some positives there, but naysayers will continue to have their say. Some of them have the impression that they are just rushing them back so they could participate in the elections, and whatever that is, only time will tell. We hope for the best.
Exactly.
Yes, it's a pleasure having you in the studio. Give us some of those drill down perspectives on the issues that made the front pages. We've been talking to the editor-in-chief of Dateline newspaper, Marlon Nasrallah, as our guest this morning. And always very insightful to have you in the studio. Thank you once again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We would now take a short break. We'll return at the top of the hour with more from Daybreak on Trust Television. Please stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that look at
not necessarily tribal or regional.